good morning, good day, good night, good everything. Rhetorical Arts here, and yeah, after I recorded their state, I was feeling good about it, and I just wanted to keep going. So y'all might get a couple videos in the next couple days of me dressed like this in my hoodie. So yeah, because I'm feeling it today. Anyway, so I've talked about the overview of the three states that I create art and life out of. I've talked about the here state, I've talked about the there state. Now I want to talk about the elsewhere state. And whereas the here state and the there state deal with creating in time and in align with the times that we move in and as we move through time, the elsewhere state is about taking you out of time altogether. And the elsewhere state is about stepping to an entire other different life, stepping into an entirely different world, a different reality, a different dimension, and making art and making life in that other place and space. And I think it's a powerful state. And before I explain it, I need to talk about, I think, a differentiation for how I see it. I think it was an interview where there was an artist talking about, that's where I got it from. And it's been written about. I'm sure you could look up the difference between imagination and fantasy. But for me, when I talk about the elsewhere state, I think I'm coming at it from a place of imagination often, but I think you can use either or. But I just want to talk about the differences and explore it. It's not something I've even fully thought through, so I'm just in the moment speaking it now. As to the implications of these two things to the elsewhere state. Anyway, so the difference between imagination and fantasy is that imagination builds on reality. It builds on something true. Whereas fantasy builds on something that doesn't actually exist. I think those are two different things. They're two different states. They're two different, not states, but they're two different ways of getting to elsewhere. One being, let me take where I am and then take off from there to somewhere else. And then another being, let me build out of what is not here right now. An example of imagination is, and I speak to kind of an idea said in a Will Smith video somewhat when I say this, but it's like seeing a bird in the sky and imagining like a metal bird holding people in it, the way that like a bird might hold certain things in its beak. And then an airplane shows up, right? Like that's imagination. Like we built that design off of things that already existed. An example of something that is fantasy is saying like, man, what would the world look like if we didn't have gravity? Well, gravity is this concept that we know, but what happens if there's a world where that's not the case and there isn't gravity? How does that work? Are there, instead of jumping into the pool, do we jump up into the pool because there's no gravity to hold the water there? Like, and it's exploring what the world looks like when certain things don't exist, or what the world looks like when certain things do exist that don't exist now. So that's kind of the difference between fantasy and imagination. And I think I bring that into the conversation because the elsewhere state is a real powerful one, regardless of whether you're using fantasy or imagination to kind of form it. to bring and to explore lives that have not been lived yet, and to perhaps give you inspiration for your life in time. I think part of what it teaches us is how to make time to be timeless. And I think that's something that we need in our world, regardless of when we're creating what, especially like for artists. Man, like there is so much, artists and creators are so constrained by time. And like, I know I've experienced this, where it's like, oh man, I talked about it yesterday. I think I mentioned it perhaps briefly in the other video, but like, yeah, yesterday I was inspired by this beat that my friend sent me, and I was like, yo, I gotta write this rap. So I wrote it, and it threw off everything. Like, threw off all the things that I had to do that night, and I ended up not getting a post done yesterday that I was looking to get done. I guess when you watch this, it'll be the day before yesterday. So, whatever. But it threw off my time, my schedule, and but I felt in that moment, on the positive side, that I needed to make time to be timeless. I needed to like throw away the clock for a minute and create this thing that was coming to me. And so much of the artist's journey is about being able to have those times where you're less focused on time, And that's the whole thing about being timeless. It's about less time. It's about having life that is less focused on time, on what you have to do next, or what you have to do tomorrow, or like, what you missed 5 minutes ago. It's about like taking a time to come alive, and explore limitlessness that comes with creating something new and following your inspiration. And the Elsewhere state is a really good place for that. It's a really good state to create without a clock. Even if the clock is there. And I think it's really important, we and something I've been thinking about this a lot. It's like, I think a lot of things that mess us up is time. It's like, oh man, when it comes to like getting the things that we want and living the life that we want, and just creating the things that come to us, time is a big, I think, thing that limits us and that kind of makes it hard. And can make it hard, because it's like, if you look at any racer, or like anyone who like runs a race or something like that, or who's swimming laps or whatever, and they're trying to like beat a time, or like get something done in a certain amount of time, or complete a race in a certain amount of time, you don't get there by focusing on the clock while you're running. Like, the idea is that you're at the starting line, you're looking, you say, okay, this is the time that I want to get this completed in, and then you let it go, and you just kind of go into the moment. And I think people get paralyzed by time. They say, oh man, I'm too old for this. Like I'm out of time. Or, oh man, like I don't have enough time. Or, oh man, it's not the right time. And I think sometimes it takes putting the clock down and just going and just walking and just doing. And one of the things I even had to learn with these videos is like, I made this whole thing. I was like, I spoke to my accountability crew and I was like, look, I'm gonna try to keep this at 5 minutes. And I have not been able to keep that goal of 5 minutes. I mean, this is already 9. And I think, that idea was to encourage myself to be as concise as possible. But sometimes there are some things that need to be explored, that need more time. And sometimes you have to be timeless to give yourself more time. And obviously you can't fully step out of time, at least in the reality we're in right now. Like, you can't fully step out of time, currently, like, just not there yet. But like, I think you can give your time to something else. And I think this is where timers come in. Like, when I'm planning my eating schedule out, or when I'm planning how long I'm gonna do things, I only consider time when I'm like, okay, this is when I need to eat next. I eat every 2 to 3 hours. That's part of how I eat right now. And I only consider time when it comes to my eating and when I'm looking at it that way. And I say, okay, well, let me put 2.5 hours on the clock so that I know I have 30 minutes to find some food when it goes off. But then I stop thinking about it. I don't think about it. I just operate. When it comes to my creative process, I'm the most productive when I give my time to a timer. And I give it to something outside of myself so that I'm less concerned with it. And I say, okay, cool. I'm going to go for 25 minutes. Or I'm going to go for, actually no, 25 minutes, I pulled that from something else. There was a podcast I was listening to this morning, the guy mentioned that. But for me, it's 30 minutes at the minimum. 30 minutes to an hour and a half has been my schedule, like, during my work days, and it was like when I put time to create. But once I hit that clock, I don't think about it. I just create. And we got to find a way to make time to be timeless. And I think it's about creating sacred spaces for the art that we're trying to create and the work of art, and it's about creating sacred spaces for the things we want to work on in our lives. And so you have to give your time to something else. And I think the elsewhere state allows you to step outside of time easier. When you're operating in that state of mind, you're able to put where you are, even where you're going, aside and step into a whole new space. I love Dungeons and Dragons because that's kind of what it does, especially when you're a player. You know, you kind of put yourself down for a bit, you step into this character, and you're able to create in a whole different world. And it's really interesting, like the way that time works here and the way that time works there is very different. So like when there's a combat scene in Dungeons and Dragons, or like you're fighting, combat in that world really only lasts like a minute. And if you think about it, that's a likelihood of a bunch of folks with axes came together. It wouldn't last too long. Like, you know, someone would lose and someone would win, or you know, retreat really quick. But it only lasts like a minute in their world. But in out here playing the game, you know, combat, depending on what's happening, can last an hour out of maybe the 3 hours that you have to play. So, you know, you know, I think the elsewhere state is really incredible because it allows you to kind of explore. In minutes, you can explore like millenniums, you know, like yeah, potentially. So I think this is about elsewhere state creation. And, you know, in Dragon Ball Z, they have this idea called the hyperbolic time chamber. Dragon Ball Z is this anime. And the idea is that you step into this world where time operates a much slower, time operates much slower in this space. So that, like, if you spend a day in there, in the outside of that chamber, a day goes by, but inside the chamber, a year goes by. So you have this time to develop and to grow and I think when we use fantasy, when we use our imaginations to kind of step outside of where we are, it allows us to go farther than we could if we were stuck in this place, if we were stuck in time. And, you know, I think there are entire tribes and civilizations still that exist in islands where time is not even a concept, and they run and they operate. And I'm not saying get rid of your obligations and just be free and just go frolic around the woods. I think sometimes you do need to do that. But what I am saying is make time to be timeless. And what I am saying is not even, I'm not really even saying that to you as like an encouragement. I'm saying like this is what the elsewhere states allows you to do. The elsewhere state of creation allows you to create art and create life outside of time, and it allows you to have less time concerns when you sit to create and craft your life and develop yourself and develop your character. So yeah, I think the elsewhere state is a powerful one, and it's one I encourage. You know, right now I'm in very much the there state, but like I'm always, at any point in time I can go elsewhere. So yeah, this is the end of the series, man. This is the 3 states of, or Actually, maybe not. It's funny, that was just a couple seconds here, but like in my head, I was in a whole other world for like a day. Like I might as well have been. Because yeah, I was in another day, and in my mind, I imagined myself in this scenario where like I did a whole other video and a whole other day, and kind of what I did to build that up and get to that point. So anyway, what I was speaking to in that elsewhere state that I was just in was, I think I'm gonna do a video where I show how these things play with each other, and how these things relate to each other and interplay, and yeah, how they work together, basically. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do a video on that, because I think these three states can work together, and I will talk about how to enter situations, realizations, and imagination that can bring those three states into conversation in your life and in your art, and how, at least how that happens with me. So yeah, I'll be bringing that out tomorrow. But the elsewhere state is really powerful. So imagine, fantasize. Sometimes when we don't have the resources, or it feels like we don't have the time, sometimes fantasy is the first step to getting ourselves going towards where we want to be, and getting ourselves going to a reality that might not exist yet. Sometimes we have to step out of time to take the time. So this is the elsewhere state. This is the third of the three states of creating life and art for me, Rhetorical Arts. See you guys tomorrow.